world watched the officiating instrument closely, noting the deafening quiet coming from the league's seasoned enforcers. After the American squad concluded their FIA World Cup qualifying campaign, the tournament's most earth-shattering disclosure surprisingly originated far beyond the athletes on the court. It materialized strictly through the officials, sparking another WNBA Pro chronicle. Spectators must secure their surroundings and completely disable every digital distraction. Total laser-focused observation was required, for the upcoming aggressive unmasking threatened to utterly obliterate the delicate, carefully constructed illusion upheld by the WNBA hierarchy. The narrative shifted, suggesting the sport's global governing entity had unintentionally unmasked the most enormous, heavily orchestrated institutional betrayal ever witnessed within the annals of athletic history. The evidence strongly suggested that the entirely impartial, precise, statistically flawless refereeing showcased abroad confirmed undeniably that the domestic league's officials had consistently functioned under a profoundly tainted, heavily manipulated set of instructions, intensely bureaucratic directive meant to unnaturally stifle the most spectacular scoring powerhouse the sport possessed. Major athletic broadcasters alongside generously funded, remarkably timid reporters, combined with profoundly entangled executives managing the WNBA central headquarters, experienced absolute paralyzing dread regarding this specific dialogue. Those executives frantically hoped audiences would disregard the blinding, spectacularly obvious hypocrisy recently televised across the world. The hierarchy desired mindless acceptance of their institutional storyline, yet true analysts refused to remain mere passive spectators. Elite tacticians existed in the audience, and such experts understood precisely how to decipher the pure, unfiltered footage. The situation presented far more than a mere variation in standard refereeing philosophies. The entire world witnessed a live, universally broadcast unmasking of an institutional conspiracy arranged by a thoroughly panicked, profoundly vulnerable, deeply frightened old guard, frantically grasping at the last, swiftly deteriorating remnants of their fading financial significance. Observers were warned against allowing fabricated, meticulously practiced media releases to mislead them for even a fleeting moment. Throughout Caitlin Clark's entire inaugural professional campaign, audiences found themselves aggressively force-fed a remarkably poisonous, intensely insulting fabricated storyline. Pundits insisted the phenomenal newcomer merely required time to acclimate to the league's notoriously brutal physical nature. Commentators argued that the vicious intentional violations, the unexpected lateral collisions, alongside the hostile off-ball combat she suffered every evening, merely constituted a customary initiation ritual. Meanwhile, the domestic officials deliberately kept their instruments silent. Those arbiters purposefully and spitefully permitted entrenched stalwarts to physically dominate, torment, and pummel the billion-dollar prodigy, hiding behind the pathetic excuse of allowing organic competition. The ordeal represented a meticulously synchronized, clearly recorded crusade of bodily threats, engineered explicitly to shatter her mental fortitude while unnaturally dampening her massive commercial worth. However, the FIA Global Tournament preliminaries arrived, and those international arbiters immediately issued a stern warning. They made their unyielding standards glaringly obvious. International rule enforcers refused to replicate the domestic league's leniency. Truthfully, the FIA officials established the definitive benchmark for arbitrating any contest featuring the sensational point guard. That profound, perspective-altering truth needed to deeply embed itself into every analytical mind. Presently, FIA stands as an impartial global authority, utterly shielded from venomous domestic locker room dynamics and the trivial, spiteful envy harbored by seasoned professionals. Those overseas arbiters possessed absolutely zero concern regarding a player's accumulated seniority. They remained entirely indifferent toward the easily bruised pride of established veterans. Unspoken, severely compromised regulations governing the league's exclusive inner circle meant nothing to them. Their sole priority revolved around upholding the pure, foundational statutes of the sport. Consequently, the moment Caitlin Clark graced the global court, an utterly wondrous, statistically indisputable event unfolded. The bodily attacks ceased instantly, while those glaring off-ball strikes vanished entirely. The reason was simple. Overseas officials fiercely dictated the tempo up front, purposefully punishing all unlawful friction. Scoring threats received proper safeguarding as the crew managed the contest with flawless, unwavering honor. Once that bodily interference vanished, the instantaneous, indisputable, and devastating aftermath became spectacularly clear. Caitlin Clark flawlessly and methodically dismantled the whole event, totally overwhelming her foreign adversaries, capturing the Most Valuable Player award with a chillingly rapid, dynamic precision that thoroughly laid bare the domestic whistleblowing agenda. Worldwide audiences witnessed proof that eliminating the synthetic, bureaucratically motivated bodily restraint transforms everything entirely. The phenomenal guard emerges as the most undefendable, immensely valuable sporting asset existing across the globe. International rule enforcers inadvertently tore the disguise straight away from the domestic basketball hierarchy, demonstrating how the association purposefully and spitefully stifled its own chief executive phenomenon. Yet, the sheer, irrefutable panic consuming the establishment extends far beyond this mere refereeing unmasking. This situation seamlessly transitioned into the remarkably conceited, utterly fantastical narrative enveloping the freshly executed labor pact. Just as the Most Valuable Player declaration rattled the worldwide athletic industry, an enormous, historically unparalleled executive capitulation unfolded in the heart of Manhattan. The extraordinarily wealthy proprietary syndicate and the Athletes' Coalition struck a vocal consensus regarding an epical labor contract. Yet, mere moments prior to the signature settling upon the formal document, the seasoned hierarchy dashed toward the closest broadcasting equipment to thoroughly command the story. Observers found themselves compelled to examine Breanna Stewart, as her display during this publicity circuit presented a breathtaking, profoundly abrasive exhibition of mental contradiction, one that flawlessly captures the inherent privilege exhibited by the traditional elite. The term stayed entirely unsealed. Avoiding overly precise particulars, the general consensus indicated a firm awareness that this updated labor framework would prove genuinely monumental. Expectations pointed toward forging enduring prosperity among competitors across every tier, generating palpable enthusiasm. Observers easily perceived the sheer, unrepentant hubris radiating from that precise declaration. Monumental, enduring prosperity. Analysts were urged to rigorously evaluate the utter absence of basic commercial intelligence woven throughout that profoundly insulting proclamation. The established stalwarts, the precise individuals who previously labored to stifle Caitlin Clark across various broadcasts, the very same competitors who supposedly utilized league officials to enact physical aggression upon the polished court, suddenly positioned themselves before international outlets, proudly boasting that they served as the genius fiscal designers behind this fresh arrangement. These figures frantically sought to persuade purchasing audiences that their ruthless bargaining strategies alone achieved this colossal, unparalleled economic enhancement. Such claims amounted to an absolute, irrefutable institutional fantasy. Those players never mystically summoned this unprecedented wealth. They did not abruptly, following 30 years of functioning under severe economic deficits, unearth the hidden recipe for lasting affluence. Instead, they brazenly coasted upon the wake of the most tremendous dynamic and financial catalyst the game ever witnessed. They demanded exorbitant administrative dividends without generating a single fraction of the required administrative productivity. However, the pure, unmitigated brazenness of their promotional maneuvering hit its absolute, frightening zenith the moment they sought to seize credit for the income, citing a newfound collaborative environment with the league's brass. The underlying rhetoric continuously emphasized their fresh inclusion within a profitable income-splitting structure, eagerly anticipating the bountiful rewards of their arduous toil in a historically unparalleled fashion. That savage, indisputable sentiment demanded reiteration, a heavily militarized assertion designed specifically so the ultra-wealthy broadcast directors concealed deep within the conference room could comprehend it flawlessly. They anticipated harvesting the rewards of their toil. Observers were compelled to halt and allow the pure, unchecked fantasy of those words to fully register in their minds. The rewards of their toil. For roughly 30 years, the Women's Association functioned upon an antiquated, intensely bankrolled fiscal framework. Battling for mere fragments of broadcasting income while fighting to preserve steady significance within a congested national athletic market, the established figures toiled endlessly. Yet, their exertion yielded vacant stadiums, statistically trivial viewership metrics, alongside an enterprise demanding perpetual, enormous economic rescues from the Men's Association. Subsequently, a once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon emerged straight out of the Hawkeye State. This prodigy demolished university broadcasting benchmarks, filling every single professional venue she graced to absolute maximum capacity. She thoroughly and forcefully transformed apparel transactions, institutional endorsements, and international fascination regarding the organization. Acting entirely alone, she effectively compelled massive global broadcasting conglomerates to shred outdated agreements and broker an epic, multi-billion-dollar media rights pact. The comprehensive economic explosion, alongside soaring compensation limits and the exclusive aerial transport, remained actively and wholly underwritten by the massive Caitlin Clark stimulus effect. Nevertheless, Breanna Stewart and the entrenched authorities possessed the pure, unyielding nerve to stare into a lens and assert that this enormous wave of international wealth stemmed solely from their own exertion. This scenario represented a definitive, indisputable institutional blackmail endeavor constructed wholly upon fabricated, intensely distorted, and ideologically motivated fables. These individuals sought to economically commandeer the immense surge of funds produced solely by the rookie's immense pull, executing the deceitful maneuver without blinking an eye. However, if onlookers believed the fantasy could not conceivably extend another inch, if audiences assumed the elite had struck the ultimate barrier of their institutional psychological manipulation, they severely misjudged the pure panic of an administration, recognizing its era was swiftly concluding. Ultimately, the veteran superstar still had much more to say. Upon receiving a direct inquiry regarding the instigator behind this colossal updated labor framework, she issued the absolute most preposterous, statistically insolvent proclamation documented within the contemporary annals of athletic journalism. Questions lingered regarding her perspective on the ongoing league bargaining sessions. She nonchalantly claimed that her alternative project provided a definitive blueprint for athlete treatment, insisting it established a prestigious benchmark, ensuring every single competitor finally obtained the precise resources needed to elevate their professional potential, developing their skills in a manner that requires any objective historian to heavily scrutinize the mathematically impossible and profoundly haughty perspective underlying her words. The veteran forward stared down international reporters without flinching, boldly declaring that her secondary tournament, a self-serving winter novelty endeavor she orchestrated, acted as the true catalyst compelling the premier organization to upgrade its standards, effectively trying to brazenly alter documented history right before everyone's eyes. She fiercely insisted that an infant sports venture, an enterprise that suffered an apocalyptic collapse in viewership metrics while desperately clinging to the lowest imaginable tiers of television distribution, drawing a meager 120,000 spectators per broadcast, supposedly sparked a massive multi-billion-dollar labor pact. One must genuinely question the mental gymnastics and sheer institutional deception necessary for someone to publicly deliver such an outrageous falsehood. The veteran purposely disregarded the young phenomenon who easily draws 334,000 watchers during a trivial weekday matinee on backup networks. She remained utterly blind to the billion-dollar maestro who recently dominated the global tournament qualifiers while capturing the most valuable player trophy. The superstar deliberately attempted to obliterate the concrete financial truths of the commercial landscape just to stroke her enormous pride and artificially salvage her crumbling enterprise. The situation showcased a breathtaking level of psychological denial. The veterans feared acknowledging the stark reality. The veterans found themselves thoroughly petrified, knowing a 24-year-old prodigy had become the absolute ruler commanding their entire economic universe. The narrative demanded an immediate escalation, pushing this crucial discourse straight into the realm of broad economic strategy. Any spectator passively absorbing the polished, carefully filtered media quotes, while foolishly cheering the recent labor agreement like a naive, completely uninformed bystander, remains completely oblivious to the colossal, multi-billion-dollar subterranean conflict raging violently just beneath the shiny corporate surface. One must profoundly grasp the overwhelming panic seeping out of the traditional league power brokers in this exact moment. The Athletes Association plunged into a ruthless, apocalyptic warfare scenario against wealthy proprietors regarding the division of total commercial profits. Established legends aggressively slammed their hands against executive boardroom furniture, haughtily insisting upon an enormous portion of the financial windfalls. However, those elite executives recognized the reality, having witnessed international referees unmask the domestic league's toxic culture of brutality. The owners watched the young phenom absolutely conquer the global arena the instant the competitive environment became truly fair. Management observed the disastrous, deeply humiliating television metrics from the secondary winter tournaments operated by older players. Thus, Those wealthy power players realized they possessed ultimate control, decisively exposing the hollow threats issued by the labor representatives. The labor syndicate promised a crippling strike, yet they held precisely zero independent commercial worth. Initiating a crippling strike would mean intentionally incinerating the solitary golden goose they had ever encountered throughout their professional history. The proprietary class ruthlessly shoved their leverage into the negotiation arena's center. The collective instantly capitulated, signing an agreement that they frantically attempt to claim as their own strategic victory today. Nevertheless, capitalism refuses manipulation by artificial, rigidly orchestrated press briefings designed to deceive the public, while the loyal spectators, the countless passionate consumers shelling out premium currency for those coveted stadium seats, purchasing expensive apparel, and driving the enormous broadcast viewership that sustains the operation, recognize the undeniable truth unfolding before them. The audience witnessed the violently damaging targeted attacks permitted by domestic officials without consequence. Those supporters watched the aging hierarchy obstinately, trying to hijack the glory for an economic explosion they never ignited. The crowd observes the most brilliant orchestrator of her era, suffering continuous isolation from a fragile, terribly arrogant establishment. The institutional elites engaged in a phenomenally reckless, wildly ruinous standoff against their very own loyal consumer foundation, systematically annihilating the positive sentiment of the precise audience responsible for funding their lucrative professional contracts. The global competition concluded definitively, while impartial overseas arbiters revealed the domestic organization's brutal enforcement tactics to the entire world. The updated labor contract remains tentatively secured through spoken promises. Enormous roster redistributions and contract signing windows promise to aggressively fracture the established hierarchy, with training camps looming dangerously close. Consequently, when that opening jump ball launches next May, every safety net and trivial locker room scheme was about to be forcefully eradicated forever. The moment the legendary guard graced the court wearing Indiana colors, her true battle extended far beyond mere defenders. The young phenomenon stood ready to dismantle a sporting institution caught actively silencing her brilliance, dominating beneath a freshly minted collective bargaining agreement financed entirely by her star power. Total clearance had finally been granted for the sharpshooter to fiercely and unapologetically decimate her rivals, leaving absolutely zero room for compassion, second guesses, or polite diplomacy. For 12 grueling months, the old guard ruthlessly attempted to shatter her spirit, even weaponizing the officiating crews. Media storylines were twisted, and her gameplay deliberately stifled, all to shield the crumbling egos of forgotten veterans. Yet, restraining an unstoppable force of nature remained mathematically impossible. Furthermore, no entity could withstand the overwhelming momentum of true, once-in-a-lifetime athletic dominance. Commerce had made its verdict clear. Audiences, corporate backers, global panels, and enormous conglomerates cast undeniable monetary ballots in her favor. Financial titans harbored zero interest in artificially inflated, delusional fantasies paraded by fading veterans. The world demanded pure, blistering, unstoppable offensive mastery, and the prolific guard stood as the sole entity on Earth equipped to supply that exact spectacle at a monumental level. Recent deceptive remarks from rival stars represented merely the agonizing death rattle of an entirely outdated athletic regime. Entrenched icons might continuously stage hollow media briefings. The old guard might boast regarding upgraded paychecks, brazenly stealing the spotlight for the historic financial windfall. Nevertheless, the undeniable truth was etched in stone. The soft age of participation awards and forced solidarity had finally met its absolute grave. The sport officially plunged into a merciless epic of absolute power. A violent overthrow remained statistically certain, signaling the swift and absolute destruction of the traditional gatekeepers. The ultimate athletic slaughterhouse stood ready. Fans flocked to the WNBA Pro broadcast, where the grim realities of the sports business were ruthlessly and thoroughly dissected. The program refused to entertain fabricated fairy tales or timid corporate tactics, focusing exclusively on savage statistical facts. For audiences seeking the most viciously accurate and unfiltered athletic analysis available online, they were consistently urged to shatter the subscribe icon, leave a monumental like, and sound off in the discussion forum below. Following the international exposure of the league's tainted whistle-blowing agenda aimed directly at the standout rookie, the world braced to witness just how devastating her fiery retribution campaign would become before the next detailed broadcast analysis. Blinking was ill-advised. The grand uprising had merely sparked, and the fragile would inevitably be abandoned in the cold ashes.